The day the first sign of the new threat appeared, it sent ripples across the galaxy. It started with a faint signal, a strange anomaly in the fabric of space that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. At first, the galaxy's top scientists thought it was a malfunction, a glitch in their sensors, or a cosmic event that would soon pass. But the signal didn't fade. It grew more powerful, more structured, and more ominous. It was clear now that something was coming, something far beyond the scope of what any species had prepared for. Across the galaxy, various races gathered in their high-tech war rooms, monitoring the signal as it moved closer to their territories. The humans on Earth, sitting in their quiet, peaceful corner of the universe, paid no attention at first. They had long been seen as a non-threat, a species that had no ambition to conquer or control the stars. Earth's leaders were focused on their own problems: climate change, resource management, and global peace. But as the signal grew louder and more distinct, even Earth could no longer ignore it. What was coming was too dangerous to be left unchecked. The first encounter with the unknown was nothing short of terrifying. A fleet of ships, unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, arrived in Earth's orbit. They were massive, their sleek black hulls absorbing light, and their technology far beyond anything the humans or any other race could comprehend. These ships didn't communicate with the humans, didn't offer any explanation for their arrival. They simply hovered there, silent and menacing. It was only a matter of time before the other galactic powers noticed. At first, the Council, the ruling body of the galaxy's most powerful races, didn't react. They dismissed the threat. After all, Earth had always been silent, a planet that had shown no signs of hostility or technological superiority. The humans were a weak, insignificant species, and this strange fleet would surely pose no challenge to them. The Council had far greater concerns, bigger, more pressing matters to attend to. But Earth's leaders weren't taking any chances. While the rest of the galaxy laughed off the arrival of the mysterious fleet, Earth was preparing. The silence from the human side was deliberate, calculated, and purposeful. Back on Earth, people were terrified, but didn't understand the full scale of what was happening. Governments around the world began to work in secret, pooling their resources, gathering their best minds, and preparing for a possible conflict they never expected. Military forces, once relegated to defense only, began to mobilize. The world united in a way it had never done before, a bond forged by the fear of an unknown enemy. Yet, no one knew who the enemy was or what they wanted. All they knew was that the ships didn't belong to any race they had encountered before. The galaxy had never seen anything like them. The first attack came without warning. A blast of energy erupted from one of the black ships, vaporizing an entire communications satellite in the blink of an eye. The destruction was so swift, so sudden, that no one had time to react. Earth's leaders now knew they were facing an enemy unlike any they had prepared for. This was not a galactic power playing its hand for domination. This was something much darker, something far more dangerous. Humanity's world, which had been so quiet for so long, was now on the edge of annihilation. On the other side of the galaxy, the Council finally took notice. They had no choice. A fleet of ships had just attacked Earth, and their technology was unlike anything the Council had ever encountered. This was the moment the galaxy's elite could no longer afford to ignore the humans. The Council began to make plans for an intervention, but something about this new threat made them hesitate. They were used to fighting wars, wars with rivals, wars with rebellious factions, and wars with smaller, weaker species. But they had never faced anything like this. Their advanced technology seemed to falter against the mysterious enemy. The first thing they noticed was that the new fleet didn't use traditional weapons. Instead, they harnessed energy in a way that bent the laws of physics, creating attacks that were both impossible to predict and nearly impossible to defend against. In a rare meeting, the Council's leaders debated what to do. Some argued that they should send an overwhelming force to Earth to eliminate the threat before it could spread. Others worried that attacking Earth would be seen as an act of aggression, pushing the human race into a conflict that they had never wanted. But as the days passed, more and more evidence came in. The mysterious fleet wasn't going to stop. It wasn't just targeting Earth. It was heading directly toward other worlds, and the destruction it left in its wake was terrifying. As the mysterious ships made their way closer to the Council's own territory, it became clear that their power was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The energy pulses from their ships had destroyed entire fleets, leaving no survivors. The Council, once so confident in their superiority, was now afraid. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about the survival of the galaxy itself. The realization struck like a thunderbolt. Humanity wasn't the cause of this terror. They were the ones being attacked. But why? What had they done to provoke such a destructive force? As the fleet drew nearer, the mystery deepened. The galaxy's greatest minds began to theorize. Had the humans unknowingly discovered something dangerous? Had they triggered something hidden deep in the fabric of the universe? Or was this a new race, one that the galaxy had never encountered before? Regardless, Earth was no longer a passive planet. It had become the battleground for something much larger than any of them could understand. With each passing day, Earth's scientists worked tirelessly to understand what they were dealing with. They knew the enemy's ships were powered by an energy source far beyond anything they had ever seen. What was this power? Where had it come from? Earth's scientists, engineers, and military strategists pooled their resources, working together in ways they never had before. In their desperation, they began to form alliances with smaller alien species, races that had once been too weak to stand against the Council. These species were just as terrified of the new threat as Earth, and they, too, had information that might help uncover the truth. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, a breakthrough came. A group of scientists had discovered something buried in the data they had collected. The black ships were not invaders. They were a message, a warning. They had not come to destroy. They had come to prevent. The galaxy's most powerful races had long been blind to an ancient secret, a secret that could unravel everything they thought they knew about the universe. As the black ships hovered over Earth's orbit, the atmosphere on the planet grew heavy with fear and uncertainty. Humanity, once mocked and ignored by the rest of the galaxy, suddenly found itself the target of an unknown and terrifying force. The message from the ships was clear, though its meaning was still hidden. Something far worse than the galaxy had ever encountered was on the horizon. Earth, once deemed insignificant, now had to rise to the challenge of defending not only their planet, but the entire galaxy. In secret, world governments and leaders came together in a united front, pooling resources and knowledge they had kept hidden for generations. Despite the chaos and fear that gripped the world, the humans had an eerie calm about them. Those who knew the truth of Earth's readiness, the galaxy's powers, still dismissive of humanity, had underestimated their resilience. The people of Earth were no longer the passive, silent beings they had once appeared to be. Instead, they were a sleeping giant awakening, and with each passing day, they began to understand more about the impending threat. What no one had anticipated was the knowledge humanity had quietly amassed over centuries, an understanding of the universe that transcended what any alien species had ever learned. Earth wasn't just a participant in this crisis. Earth was the key to solving it. However, the enemy was relentless. Despite their preparations, the mysterious force moved closer, and with each new attack, Earth's chances seemed slimmer. The galaxy's most powerful races, who had long ignored the human race, now had no choice but to confront the reality. The terrifying force wasn't just targeting Earth. It was targeting everything. And the solution to stop it was hidden somewhere in humanity's silent, calculated history. But the question remained, would Earth's preparation be enough, or had the galaxy underestimated the threat far too much? As the situation grew dire, Earth's leaders and the galaxy's most brilliant minds scrambled to decipher the enemy's true purpose before it was too late. As Earth braced for the full extent of the threat that loomed over them, Humanity's quiet strength began to reveal itself in unexpected ways. While the rest of the galaxy scrambled, confused and unprepared, the humans had been working in the shadows for years, meticulously preparing for a crisis they knew would eventually come. It was not a random coincidence that humanity had been so silent for so long. While the powerful galactic races had been busy expanding, fighting wars, and focusing on their own ambitions, Earth had been watching, learning, and waiting. Over the centuries, humanity had accumulated knowledge that no other race had. Their silence wasn't one of weakness. It was a deliberate act of restraint, an act of preservation. Earth had known that the galaxy was filled with turmoil, and instead of jumping into the chaos, they chose to observe, study, and prepare. Now, as the first waves of destruction spread from the black ships, it became clear that humanity's preparations were far more advanced than anyone could have imagined. While the galaxy's most powerful forces were caught off guard, struggling to comprehend the strange energy that powered the mysterious ships, Earth's scientists, engineers, and military leaders quickly set their plans into motion. They had secretly developed advanced technologies, hidden from the prying eyes of the galactic powers, technologies that could now give them a fighting chance. Even more critical, Earth had gathered a network of allies. Alien species that had been marginalized and oppressed by the galaxy's most dominant empires. These once overlooked races were now eager to fight alongside humanity. The silent observers were now uniting, bound by a common enemy and a shared desire to survive. The more the galaxy's powers realized the depth of Earth's knowledge and preparation, the more they began to understand the magnitude of their mistake in dismissing humanity for so long. Earth wasn't just some quiet, insignificant planet. It had quietly become the guardian of an ancient truth that could hold the key to stopping the impending disaster. The question was no longer about whether Earth could defend itself. It was about whether they could convince the rest of the galaxy to work together in time to stop the unimaginable force that was already on their doorstep. But the clock was ticking, and with each passing day, the enemy grew stronger, more aggressive, and closer to Earth's fragile defenses. Humanity's silence had been their strength, but now, the time for waiting was over. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin, and Earth had to lead the way, whether the galaxy was ready for it or not. As the full scope of the threat became undeniable, the galaxy's most powerful races, who had once laughed at humanity's quiet existence, found themselves forced to acknowledge the silent strength they had long ignored. The alien species, who had once dismissed Earth as insignificant, were now scrambling to make sense of the situation and decide on a course of action. But the damage had already been done. Earth's isolation had been both a blessing and a curse. While humanity had been quietly preparing for an event like this, the galactic powers were blind to the growing danger until it was almost too late. The black ships, which had been circling the planet, were no longer just a threat to Earth. They were now targeting entire star systems, erasing them with an efficiency and power that no one had thought possible. The advanced technologies of the galaxy's ruling empires, ships, weapons, defenses, were being wiped out with terrifying ease. Every time the galaxy's fleets attempted to retaliate, they were met with devastating force. As the galaxy's military leaders and top strategists tried to come up with a plan, they quickly realized they were powerless against this new enemy. What could they possibly do when their best weapons and most advanced ships were useless? The situation was worse than any of them had imagined. Earth had been preparing for decades. Yes, but it was clear that their ability to defend the galaxy was limited. The stakes had grown far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The galaxy's most advanced races now began to question everything they knew about the balance of power in the universe. Earth, once seen as a weak and primitive planet, now held a crucial piece of the puzzle that could stop the looming disaster. The humans had known something they hadn't, and they had made moves that the galaxy had not. But even with all their preparation, the question remained: would Earth's strength and the alliances they had carefully cultivated be enough to turn the tide? The fear among the galaxy's ruling powers was palpable. The destruction spread quickly, And even as Earth made contact with its hidden allies, alien species that had long been oppressed by the galaxy's dominant powers, it became clear that they were running out of time. No one had anticipated this force, this relentless enemy that seemed to defy every known law of the universe. The galactic powers now had to ask themselves a question they never thought they'd have to consider. Could Earth, a planet they had once underestimated, be the only hope for their survival? The galaxy's greatest powers watched their fleets crumble in the face of this mysterious enemy. A creeping realization began to set in. Humanity, the very species they had once mocked, might be their only chance for survival. Earth had not only prepared itself for the worst, but had quietly gathered the knowledge, resources, and alliances needed to face this unprecedented threat. The galaxy's leaders had always underestimated Earth's potential, viewing its inhabitants as little more than primitive, peaceful creatures unworthy of their attention. But now, as the black ships advanced relentlessly, obliterating entire planets, humanity's unassuming nature was beginning to seem like a brilliant strategy. Earth's scientists and military leaders, working hand in hand with alien races that had once been dismissed as weak or inconsequential, began to piece together what had long been hidden from the galaxy. The black ships were not mere invaders. They were agents of a much older, more sinister force. The truth was staggering, and it shook the foundation of everything the galaxy had believed. The black ships were the harbingers of something far worse, an ancient entity that had been lying dormant for eons, waiting for the right time to strike. Humanity's quiet existence was no accident. It had been a form of cosmic preservation. Earth had been chosen as the guardian of a hidden power, a force so immense that it could rewrite the very fabric of the universe. For centuries, humanity had unknowingly guarded this force, keeping it locked away from those who would seek to use it for destruction. The reason the galaxy had never been able to conquer Earth, or even fully comprehend it, was that the planet was far more than a simple member of the galactic community. It was the key to preventing the galaxy's destruction. Now, with the black ships closing in and the galaxy's most powerful races reeling from their own inadequacy, humanity had to step forward. But the question was whether the galaxy's old powers would accept the truth in time, or whether their arrogance and pride would continue to blind them until it was too late. Earth's leaders knew they had little time left to convince the galaxy that their survival hinged on the very species they had once scorned. But as the enemy grew closer, it became apparent that this was not a fight they could win alone. Earth would need the help of every race in the galaxy, and that meant overcoming years of distrust and prejudice. Yet in this desperate hour, humanity's unshakable determination and the quiet strength they had cultivated for so long would be put to the ultimate test. The galaxy was about to learn just how wrong it had been about Earth, and how the very future of the universe now rested in humanity's hands. With each passing day, the black ships grew closer, and the galaxy's greatest minds scrambled to understand the enormity of the threat they faced. The truth that had been hidden for so long was now coming into focus. Earth, a planet once seen as insignificant, was now the center of the galaxy's last hope. The black ships weren't just invaders. They were sent by a force much older and more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever encountered. As the humans pieced together the ancient messages embedded in the ship's energy patterns, they began to understand the horrifying reality. The enemy wasn't just after Earth, it was after the entire galaxy. The force behind the black ships had lain dormant for millennia, waiting for the right moment to strike. And now, that moment had come. For centuries, humanity had unknowingly guarded a cosmic secret, an ancient power that could either save the galaxy or destroy it. The human race, despite being dismissed as weak and insignificant, had been chosen as the protectors of this power. Earth's leaders and scientists now knew that they had a responsibility far greater than anything they had ever imagined. But time was running out. The black ship's energy attacks had already obliterated entire systems, and the galaxy's most powerful fleets had been unable to mount any kind of effective resistance. Humanity's quiet preparation had given them the knowledge to stand a chance, but the task ahead seemed insurmountable. The galaxy's elite races, once arrogant in their belief that they held dominion over the stars, were now in a desperate race to catch up. As Earth's military began to mobilize, forming new alliances with alien species that had once been considered insignificant, it became clear that only by uniting could they hope to survive. The galaxy's old powers had failed to see the potential in Earth, and now they had no choice but to turn to the very race they had mocked. But even with humanity's advanced technologies and alliances, the true nature of the enemy remained elusive. No one understood exactly what drove the black ships or what the entity behind them truly wanted. What was clear, however, was that the galaxy had misjudged Earth. The silence of the humans was not a sign of weakness. It had been a sign of caution, a calculated move to protect the universe from a force far greater than any empire had ever faced. And now, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, humanity had no choice but to lead the charge. But as the enemy closed in, the question lingered: would the galaxy's prideful leaders be able to set aside their arrogance and trust in the very species they had once scorned? Or would their inability to accept the truth be the galaxy's undoing? As the black ships began their final approach, the galaxy stood on the precipice of annihilation. The greatest empires, once confident in their unmatched power, had been brought to their knees. Their fleets were in ruins, their worlds burned, and their arrogance shattered. Now all eyes turned to Earth, the planet they had ignored, ridiculed, and underestimated for so long. The humans, once thought to be weak and unworthy of notice, had become the only force standing between the galaxy and total extinction. But even as the leaders of the galaxy reluctantly placed their hope in Earth, doubts still lingered. Could humanity truly lead them to victory? Could the race they had dismissed as primitive hold the answers to defeating an enemy that had already crippled the greatest civilizations in the stars? Earth's leaders knew there was no time for hesitation. In the shadows of history, they had prepared for a moment like this, while the rest of the galaxy had been fighting amongst themselves, conquering and ruling. Humanity had been watching, studying, and understanding the deeper truths of the universe. Now their knowledge would be put to the test. With a unified strategy, Earth revealed its hidden technologies, ships unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, weapons designed not for conquest, but for survival, and tactics that defied the very logic of warfare. But even with all their preparations, the odds were stacked against them. The black ships moved with an eerie precision, their attacks bending the very fabric of reality, their weapons dissolving entire planets with a silent pulse. Yet despite the overwhelming power of the enemy, humanity did not falter. They had spent centuries being underestimated, ignored, and dismissed. They had been the silent observers of the galaxy's arrogance, the quiet architects of their own destiny. Now, as they stood on the front lines of the greatest battle in history, they would prove that their silence had never been weakness. It had been wisdom. And as the first wave of Earth's forces clashed with the black ships, the galaxy held its breath, watching as the fate of all life hung in the balance. The final battle had begun, and for the first time, the galaxy understood what humanity had always known. Silence was never surrender. It was the calm before the storm. The battle that followed would be remembered for eternity. A war not just of firepower and strategy, but of survival itself. As Earth's forces engaged the black ships, the galaxy's most powerful races, once dismissive of humanity, watched in stunned silence. The humans fought with a precision and ferocity that no one had expected. Their ships moved in coordinated strikes, dodging the deadly pulses of the enemy with an almost unnatural instinct. Weapons that had been secretly developed for decades were unleashed, disrupting the strange energy shielding of the black ships, and for the first time, dealing real damage. But it was not just their technology that made humanity different. It was their resilience, their ability to adapt and push forward even in the face of certain destruction. As the battle raged, The black ships began to shift tactics, reacting in ways that suggested an intelligence beyond mere programming. The entity behind them had finally taken notice of Earth, recognizing that this once ignored species was more dangerous than anticipated. The enemy's attacks grew more aggressive, tearing through space with raw, merciless power. Entire sections of Allied fleets were wiped out in an instant, but humanity did not break. Where other species panicked, humans adjusted. Where other armies hesitated, humans charged forward. And when the galaxy's leaders saw this, they finally understood the truth. Humanity had been waiting for this moment. They had known that one day, something greater than their wars and politics would threaten them all. Their silence had not been a sign of weakness. It had been patience, preparation for the battle that now unfolded before them. As Earth's forces pushed deeper into the heart of the enemy fleet, something changed. The black ships hesitated, reacting sluggishly, as if something had disrupted their coordination. Humanity had found their weakness, not in brute force, but in something far greater. The entity controlling the black ships was not invincible. It could be fought. And in that moment, the galaxy realized that the fate of every living being rested in the hands of the very species they had once ignored. The final strike was coming, and as Earth prepared to deliver it, the galaxy could only watch, knowing that history had already changed. Humanity had proven their worth, and their silence had never been weakness. It had been the quiet before the storm that would decide the fate of the universe. As the battle reached its peak, the black ships began to fracture under the relentless assault. The entity that controlled them, once so certain of its victory, now struggled to maintain its grip on the battlefield. The humans had done the impossible, not through sheer firepower alone, but through a deep understanding of the enemy's nature. For centuries, they had been watching, learning, and preparing for a threat the rest of the galaxy had been too arrogant to even consider. And now, that knowledge was proving to be the difference between survival and extinction. The enemy was not invincible. Its power, though vast, had limits. Humanity had uncovered something buried within the black ship's technology, an ancient frequency, a signal that disrupted their connection to their master. By amplifying it, they had weakened the enemy's control, forcing the black ships to act erratically, making mistakes they had never made before. The once perfect formations of the enemy fleet began to break apart, and for the first time, the tides of battle shifted. The other races, witnessing this, finally understood why Earth had remained silent for so long. Humanity had never been afraid. They had been waiting for the right moment. And now, as the black ships faltered, Earth's forces pressed forward, launching their final gambit. A fleet of human ships, carrying a weapon unlike any the galaxy had ever seen, pushed deep into the heart of the enemy's command structure. This weapon, created in the shadows of Earth's history, was designed for one purpose: to sever the entity's connection to its fleet and end its reign before it could consume the entire universe. But the enemy was not done yet. Sensing its impending defeat, it lashed out with a desperate fury, launching waves of attacks that tore through the battlefield with devastating force. Entire human squadrons were wiped out in an instant, their sacrifices buying precious seconds for the final mission to succeed. Earth's greatest minds worked furiously, adjusting their strategy in real time, adapting as only humans could. The galaxy's most powerful races, once unwilling to follow, now fought alongside them, trusting humanity's plan. The fate of millions of worlds now rested on a single moment, and as Earth's ships reached their target, they unleashed the weapon that would change everything. A blinding pulse of energy spread through the battlefield, disrupting the black ship's systems in an instant. The entity let out a final, terrible cry, one that echoed not in sound, but in the very fabric of reality. And then, silence. The black ship stopped. The enemy's hold was broken. And the galaxy, at last, was free. For a moment, the battlefield was frozen in eerie silence. The once imposing black ships drifted lifelessly, their power severed, their master's control shattered. Across the galaxy, Countless species who had watched in fear now realized the truth. Humanity had done the impossible. The enemy, an entity that had consumed civilizations for millennia, had finally been defeated. But the cost had been staggering. Human ships floated in wreckage, many of Earth's greatest warriors lost in the final strike. The leaders of the once mighty galactic empires, who had dismissed and mocked humanity for their silence, now understood the weight of that silence. Earth had never been weak. They had been patient, preparing for a war the rest of the galaxy had refused to see coming. And now, they had saved them all. As the dust settled, the surviving alien fleets turned toward Earth's remaining ships, not with scorn, but with something new: respect, even admiration. The species that had once been ignored had now changed the fate of the universe. But even as the galaxy celebrated its survival, humanity knew this was not the end. The black ships had been defeated, but the entity that controlled them, whatever ancient force had been lurking beyond the stars, was not truly gone. It had been wounded, forced into retreat, but it would return. And when it did, Earth would be ready. They had proven themselves not just as another race in the galactic community, but as its protectors, its silent guardians. The empires that had once ruled unchallenged now looked to humanity, not as an inferior species, but as the ones who had seen the truth all along. And as the galaxy began to rebuild, one thing became clear: the age of arrogance had ended, and the age of humanity had begun. In the aftermath of the war, the galaxy stood at a crossroads. The once mighty empires, humbled and shaken, had no choice but to accept a new reality. Humanity, the species they had ignored for so long, had risen to the forefront of galactic affairs. Earth, once considered an insignificant world on the outer edges of civilization, was now the heart of a new alliance, a coalition forged not through conquest or intimidation, but through sacrifice and survival. The leaders of the surviving races gathered for the first time, not to dictate terms to humanity, but to listen. The silence that had once been mocked was now revered, for they understood what it had meant: preparation, patience, and wisdom beyond their own arrogance. But even as treaties were signed and alliances were formed, humanity remained wary. The entity that had commanded the black ships was still out there, lurking in the unknown void beyond the galaxy's borders. It had been defeated, not destroyed. And that meant the war was not truly over, only delayed. Earth's scientists worked tirelessly, analyzing the remnants of the enemy's technology, searching for any clue about its origin and its weaknesses. Humanity knew that when the entity returned, it would not make the same mistakes again. And this time, the galaxy had to be ready. But there was something else, something hidden in the ruins of the enemy fleet. An ancient warning, encoded in a language that had not been spoken in millions of years. A message left behind by those who had faced this horror before, long before humanity had even taken its first steps into space. The warning was clear. The entity was only one part of something far greater, a force that had devoured entire galaxies before them. And now it knew humanity existed. It knew they were a threat. As Earth's leaders studied the message, a grim realization settled over them. The silence that had once protected them was gone. The galaxy had seen what humanity could do, and somewhere in the darkness beyond the stars, something else had seen it too. Something older, something worse, and it was watching.